welcome to another episode of Black No Sugar. If it's your first time, we're at a Left Book Cafe, Kanjocha Street. Come check them out. They have amazing books, so you could have your food as you also read. Subscribe to this channel if it's your first time. Follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, and Twitter. It's Black No Sugar all through. Today, we'll be talking about something a bit sticky. Marriage and divorce. Yeah? It's I have my usual suspect, Tendo, and we have a visitor today, an expert in these things, who will be telling us more where we'll be going astray. Today this conversation is extremely important, or it's critical around this time, because we've been seeing a lot of legislative development in this country. The succession bill, having now passed into an act, has been a milestone for the women's movement in Uganda that have been fighting for this thing. But also, I know that historically, I don't know if it's the same elsewhere, our visitor will tell us while she's introducing herself, that legislative review or policy review is very difficult, especially if the people legislating are not alive to the needs of the people that they are legislating for. And today, of critical concern is the marriage and divorce bill, which has changed name several times. The domestic relations bill to the marriage bill, that let's remove divorce. It's as if we are legislating an illegality. So we'll be diving deep into that, in understanding the concept of marriage right now and how it has evolved, and then divorce, and then reasons why we are having maybe high divorce cases, but also why for 40 years this particular bill that has been supported by several even civil society institutions, supporting them to understand, you see, this is extremely important because these are the numbers we are dealing with up to now. Is still shelved. But first, our visitor will introduce herself.
My name is Prima. Hi, it's so good to be here. I have been following Black No Sugar on YouTube and social media.
Thank you.
Very good work that you're doing, Kemi. Thank you so much. So, yeah, my name is Prima Kwagala. I'm a human rights lawyer. I work with the Women's Pro Bono Initiative. We work with women all the time. I work 8 to 5 days a week. Is women. We're dealing with divorce. Yeah. We're dealing with childcare, neglect, and issues that women are raising in our community and society as a whole. So, yeah, I think you're right. I would say I'm an expert around women's issues, emotions, and marriage. Yeah. I'm not married, but I've had quite a bit and a lot of the emotions that go through.
Yeah, it's even exciting that she's highlighting that she's not married, because I know that many times opinions of unmarried women on marriage issues are very many times dismissed because you have not been there, so you wouldn't know. I'll begin with you, Tendo, or really Prima, on what you think has evolved with the marriage scene, like with the institution of marriage. What have been some of the evolutions in there? Has it changed from being a social, structure to an individualistic thing? I don't know. Have you seen any evolutions in the institution?
That's a very hard question. I think I need to think through it. But first of all, you can't talk about marriage without talking about family. So the whole conversation around marriage is really what are the structures within families and whether that has evolved. Yeah. I think it has evolved over time, even just from the traditional marriage or something that was not so formal, that has now been formalized by colonialism. The fact that now, you have to get married to someone and they are your one and only what soulmate, and then you can't leave them for the rest of their lives because for some reason they'll die if you leave. I don't know. But it being made into a religious institution and something where, we both have to be together for the rest of our lives. That's another transition that mainly came with colonialism. Yeah. But I think also, it depends on the places. I've always told people that, now for us in rural areas, us who live in rural areas, a lady will marry here, and tomorrow she'll go to the next door neighbor, and she'll have kids there, and this man will take care of these ones, and then they'll know that these two are mine, these ones are not mine, like that. And I think, of course, those also have their own issues, because I think now that's where now the problem of the law comes in, is that it's not settled in our own, So for that woman who is really, the word is called cohabiting, but I think even that's a very Western thing. But in our context, women were able to actually move from place to place and, according to how they felt they were being treated within this union. Some stayed for years, others moved, really. It was up to the two people in this, union to decide where to go. And they had rights even within that, because I still have children with you that you are supposed to take care of and stuff like that. So I think that transitions are many, they happen, but I think the main problem really for me is the law not being able to understand the context in which we are in, and insisting that a colonial concept is what will, settle it all, and, there has to be a very long divorce proceeding. Because I don't think anyone should be tied to someone who they don't like for quite a long time, and it has not even been in our situation. We have cultures where if you didn't pay bride price, they would take their children and their wife, both of them, and give them to another husband, and these children would not be yours. They'll just grow up in another context as someone else's children because he was able to pay the bride price. Not to say that it's, an okay thing, but the fact that, we are Ugandans and we have different cultures and they say different things, and not to try to harmonize all of us into that one thing that you want us to, be, is my issue, really.
Yeah. You speak about important things, Tendo. You're talking about cohabitation. That's a very sticky subject to hear, that even when more than 70% of the women in this country, for those that are not aware, cohabitation is those things of where you're with your partner, usually in heterosexual marriages, a man and a woman are living together but are not legally married. Legally married, I mean either customarily or in a civil manner, in the four recognized types of marriages in this country. So that's cohabitation. So it does not matter how many years you have been together, that is your girlfriend and this is your boyfriend. So there will be problems in there. And of course, I'll just go to Prima quickly. So while we talk about marriage today, it's almost impossible for us not to talk about divorce, because while some marriages work, some sometimes do not work. Tendo has told us that the root where the marriage institution is rooted is sometimes even the problem as to why we may see many divorces happening, or separations, depending on what dissolution of that relationship the couple decides to do. And I know that amidst this conversation on marriage and divorce, we've seen our legislators being very hesitant to legislate cohabitation. And the excuses are usually the same. It's hard. So is it after 2 years that you've been with a person that will say you're able to share their property, you guys are able to share? Shall we consider you a spouse after 6 months? There are some women who do not come to cook, loosely translated, but they just come to cheat these men and all these things. So I think it's also important for us today to just have a conversation about the concept of divorce, because it's happening in many parts of this country. So the earlier we begin to legislate it, the better. And just recently, the constitutional petition by Ngobi Ndiko and 4 others, talking about the different sections of the Divorce Act and it being extremely problematic is why we'd like for you to speak about it, Prima. What do you think have been the social, underpinnings of divorce in this country, and maybe briefly also speak about the constitutional petition?
The constitutional petition, I'm not part of that constitutional petition, but as a lawyer myself as well, I'm very skeptical about speaking about merits and demerits of certain cases. But broadly, the petition is really challenging having to seek more like consent to divorce. Because as autonomous individuals, people who are capable of making decisions for ourselves, both as women and men in a relationship, you get to a part where you feel like, I can't push this anymore. I need to be able to move away. And you were talking about evolution of marriage. In the past, marriage, well, it was important. You could go get married, but if things became difficult, traditionally your parents would be like, okay, let your sister try. And you go and do it as a family for someone. If you're not having boys, because not having boys in a marriage can also be an issue. Then they will say, okay, let your sister try. Maybe she will have some sons for your husband or something like that. It was looked at more like a communal thing. The whole thing about marriage was communal. But with the coming of the colonialists, then marriage has been commercialized. Agency on the part of the woman is taken away. She can't make a decision because, come on, I paid my things. At what point do you go away? If your parents do not have the money to refund the cows and the goats and the tomatoes, then you're more like a slave. You came
this marriage.
you came to provide labor. You're supposed to reproduce. You can't go away without refunding that. So we had to go through the court processes of, we can't refund because how are you going to refund the years of unpaid domestic labor that this person has been giving? Can we also refund the children that she had? Because ideally, if you paid your 5 cows, then are your 5 cows equivalent to the number of children this woman has had? So we then said, no more paying. Whatever you bring is a bridal gift. You cannot attach a cost to a human being. So in the traditional setting, that would be divorce. But now today, the whole petition is, cycling around the fact that why can't we two people, if marriage is between 2 people, why can't we sit down and say it's not working, we sign our papers and we just go and have them registered and endorsed that we are separate and we, and then there is the court system and the public saying, no, it's not just between you two. There's the rest of us involved. So we must sit and the court makes a decision around the whole thing. So it's the whole debate around that.
I partly agree, but I know that also constitutional petitions usually take a bit of while, but I'm excited to see this unveil, especially on the fact that I cannot choose to divorce until a court decides on it. When you talk about it in lay language is when you understand how problematic this is. So I must seek to say, I do not want to be with this person anymore. And then court is going to adjudicate whether I'm saying he has beaten me, I want to leave, or the man saying this woman is no longer right for me. No, prove to us that this woman is not right for you. Prove to us that I am no longer able to stay with this man. It seems off. So, which brings in the question that who is benefiting from the institution of marriage, and why should we uphold these sections of the law that are not working in our context? And maybe, Prima, you could just also briefly take us through how the Marriage and Divorce Bill, which is a core legislation on marriages, but also divorces, how it has evolved from the last 40 years when it was first draft, when we first saw the first draft. We've seen so many civil society institutions, isnt, FIDA, AMWA, all the institutions that have been part of the process of saying, you see, this is extremely important. Don't remove this section on cohabitation because it works. There have been different campaigns on these kinds of work. Why has it been that for the last 40 years, this bill keeps on coming back, having a change of name, having a few things removed here and there, but it never makes any headway? Who is interested in this process? Why isn't it moving?
I could say the patriarchy underlines most of the things. Underneath everything. I remember there was a time the Marriage and Divorce Bill was tabled in Parliament. And then we had people mobilizing Muslim women to say, to go on the streets to say, hey, for us, we are comfortable with being several of us in a marriage. So you can't do this. Then you had traditionalists opposing. Then you had religious people saying you cannot speak about marriage and divorce in the same sentence. It's like you're setting out to fail, to divorce. And divorce, and as I mentioned earlier, is not something that, in a capitalist society, divorce is like, hey, you're going away with something that belongs to us. The development of the marriage and divorce and the redrafting, the entire process, in the past, I was saying, in the past you got married, when you got tired, you bring your sister.
Also
She tries, but remember now it's double labor. You've come to dig extra fields, provide more food, maybe bring along more kids. The family keeps growing. But, where you're coming from, it keeps reducing. There's not much going back. So, with the marriage and divorce in the past, even when the British came around, because the laws on marriage and divorce that we have are really British laws, which don't even work in Britain currently. The British said this is wife purchasing. They still looked at it from a commercial sense. Wife buying, wife purchasing, that's what they call it. And then they decided to come up with the marriage laws. And in the marriage laws now, there's certain things you have to prove that the man has been cruel. If the man has been raping you, then you have to bring it out in the public
Yeah.
and say, look, he has been raping me. But then again, you have to provide proof
Yeah.
in an open court. I mean, no one is having sex in the public. And in African traditions, you know, sex is not something we talk about in the public. So having to talk about rape in the public and proving the same in a public court, it's just dehumanizing. It's so painful, stigmatizing. Then you fit the bad woman
Yeah.
campaign.
And I know that sometimes even couples, that the friction between them becomes even stronger during the divorce process. You know, the whole you've been served, then you have to reach court and you're not speaking to each other. And I think that contributes to even the fact that many people are disinterested. Like, I will stay in a marriage that is not working because when I think about the process, then it's more painful, the back and forth with the person's lawyers. You having to prove that the person was cruel to me is, like you said, Tendo, is very dehumanizing.
It is and usually, I think for me, marriages, most of them are built on the pain of women. How much can you kuguma? In quotes, eh? How much pain are you able to take in? That's even when you have conversations with people, they say, but our mothers stayed. They recognize that their mothers were in pain, but because they stayed, you also have to stay so that this institution called marriage does not fall down. And I think that's where the problem is. And I think that's why in our local cultures, we knew that, you know, marriages are not forever, people disagree, and we created solutions around when, you know, what are mediation and reconciliation, and then when all that fails, you create a path for someone to live. And I know also for some religions like Islam, you know, ironically, is that it's easier for a woman to get divorced in that way than as a Christian, you know, bride. And for me, I still think that the conversation really always comes down to religion. It should never come down to tradition, because traditionally, you are allowed to live. Every tradition has a way in which, especially African tradition, in which women can live when they feel like they are not being served the purpose of being in that marriage. Speaking about who benefits really, and we know that marriage institutions, people try to spin it all around how women benefit because they get the ring, simanya, they are knelt for, they get, the only thing that you get is to be called a missus. But this person is getting free labor because you're working. You're giving this person children, and you're taking care of them, and you're taking care of him, and you're taking care of his businesses, and you're making sure you fill in the food security gaps. And really, even at a higher level, men know, at a state level, they know that if women leave marriages, there'll be an issue of care work, and the state has to provide money in order to take care of that care work. So it's not even just a conversation of me and you, but at a higher level, the state doesn't provide for these things. The state does not provide for a sick grandmother or incapacitated people. So it's the women that do all that work. And because we don't, I think, sit down and think about it, we do it with all the passion and love, yet the state knows that if your labor is not there, you know, it will have to pay for these things. Who will take care of the men and free their time to go and work for all those 8 hours that they work? It is us who have to take care of them, take care of the children, so that they can go out there. That means that there is no care provided for children and all those things. And the state, by the way, sometimes we think that politicians and the president and the government are blind. They take all these things into consideration when they are making laws, and they're like, so if this happened, if women got divorced, then who would, you know, free the men's time, you know, to come and do all this work? And they know, they are not blind, they are not, you know, you say, nati muchala wange. No, they are not even at that level of family. They're at a level of state and what they would have to provide, that women provide for free, for years, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. And as you kept on speaking about tradition, I don't know if I disagree with the fact that, I know that traditionally women had a means of moving from one maybe family to another, but I also know that culture and tradition has also, you know, has shackles on women's legs, many women's legs. You know, you cannot leave because you look like the bad woman whose marriage did not work. You cannot leave because you're bringing all this shame to this family. So we have seen marriages where they insist that you stay even if you have stopped sharing a bedroom with your partner, you will still have to stay so that things look like they're working. Tendo was talking about people that have interest in marriage and divorce as they are the status quo on those two concepts. Are there any fundamentalist groups, some ideological groups that have interest in where we are standing at in regards to marriage and then divorce and the different other family laws that we have in place right now?
Yeah, there's so many. I would say the church, or even religious leaders as a whole. They're key stakeholders in marriages. Well, something we never talk about. Religious leaders make money out of this whole thing. The more marriages, the more money you take to the church. I mean, come on, the state is making money because, I mean, when you get married, you get a license. So there is that revenue that is coming in. So when you start talking about, say, like in the marriage and divorce bill, recognizing the come we stay. We've been staying together for 7 years, so we should be recognized as a legal union. We didn't go and sign anywhere or write anything. Something, again, the constitutional case is talking about. Why, if we decided to stay together, why don't you recognize that? You know, there's that bit of tax for you to get a license. I think it's 150,000. Imagine if every cohabiting come we stay couple was paying 150 to the state.
There's even the church fee that you pay at the different churches where you get. And that's why I'm very wary of religious institutions and their role they've played in making sure the marriage and divorce bill, which currently, just for information, is the marriage bill. Like we talked about before, the divorce bill has been fought. The divorce, because like Prima said, we cannot legislate for something to fail. It is a sacred institution, sacred, and we cannot talk about divorce in the same name as, in the same sentence as we speak about marriage. So maybe, Prima, sorry, I interrupted. You were talking about the different groups that have had interests in seeing that the status quo stays as is.
Well, I mentioned the state, it is getting money, that tax for the license that you pay. Then there is the church. I mean, you still pay some. It's not too much, but it is a certain way that they get back something from the marriage. If you have children, there is the baptism things, there is the, you know, those whole rituals that happen within the church. Still for baptism, you need a baptism card, so you remit something. I mean, if you're a member of a church,
you are a member of other things like Mothers Union, where us unmarried mothers have been just
counseling and taking care of the community and ensuring that there is some sort of harmony. You know, there's mediation, like certain spaces of control. You know, because if you are in the church is telling you to submit to the state. If you are in the church is reminding you every other day to submit to your husband. So it is a system of control, in my opinion. So it is a system of control, and in so many ways taking away from a woman. You know, we should be asking women to exercise agency, exercise autonomy, promoting dignity of individuals, human rights, be able to make decisions on how you can lead your life and how that goes. But I mean, if you have these fundamentalists saying no,
but also we need to maintain the I think what people think of is, because a lot of these laws are around women's rights groups and CSOs are the ones that are saying this is not right, this is right, based on these statistics and stuff like that. And so people think that, you know, because I'm a women's activist, I'm being paid $10,000 maybe per month in order to pay all these, you know. I wish I was being paid all that money anyway. I think other donors are getting, other people, they are not telling me their secrets. But there is that thought that these things are foreign, and so the women's rights groups and all these other CSOs are peddling it, while the people that are in parliament and the religious leaders, man, they're just moral people. They love God. These guys are getting paid by fundamentalist groups like the New Hope and other organizations. They're getting paid to make sure that they, what is it? Constipate these rights in order for them not to get where they are going. When you see someone saying like the mini bill, you know, or anti-pornography bill and stuff like that, they're not doing it because they are so moral and they are so good and they are not receiving any money in order to peddle this, you know, policy. They are receiving money and they are doing policy and they are also planning. We shall do this and then we do this and then we do this, just like the women's rights groups are doing. But I think the question for us as, you know, as Africans, as Ugandan, because the beauty about African culture was always the fact that it could, and maybe also a disadvantage, because when modernity comes, somehow it recreates itself in order to capture that new era. And so I think now it's for us to ask where we are. Is it working? This thing that we are saying that, you know, a religious leader is telling you get married forever. Is it working? And if it's not working, how does our culture evolve in order not to throw away our culture, but how does it evolve? Because our culture has always evolved. And I think that was also like the issue why we became now so religious and stuff like that. But also not to always just think that your pastor and the father, Lokodo, for example, is not getting paid to do that work, because he is getting paid to actually come and say, you know, and which I find really horrible, that that people in miniskirts should be raped and all that other, you know, jazz around that. They are being paid to also do that. Yeah. And the conversation for them is not even around facts. They are really just working around your emotions to say, you know, do you love marriage? You see your father and grandfather and you're going to hell, and all these other conversations that have been peddled really around marriage. And I think that if you legalize divorce does not specifically mean that the rate of divorce will go high. You see? And that's the thought that people always have. If we legalize drugs, if we legalize, you know, sex work, but the statistics show something really different, that in places where sex work is legalized, or in places where there is, you know, divorce is allowed, people are more likely not to even get divorced. It's just to create an environment, because people always say, the state cannot legislate matters of your home. But just by saying those things that they are telling us around marriage and staying married forever, they are doing exactly that. So they are able to also say we need to protect either women or men in this space by putting this law in place in case you need it. Because you're legislating for everyone, not legislating for Namata Tendo. You're not legislating for me as a saved, a born again and all those things. You're legislating for a whole state, an entire nation of people. And therefore we should never bring the conversation down to if you're my brother or if you're my sister, and even if we brought it down to that, would you really want someone to die in a marriage, you know, because they are fighting for issues? Then even the other day the pastor Bujinga was saying, my wife has bled for 3 years, and like we don't even want it to get to that point where people balimukwera and get diseases and sicknesses and taking the dignity out of, you know, someone. And religious leaders are clever. They are able to divorce and leave their wives and even live their life and still come out here and even cheat and have other women on the side and then come out to you and preach to you something extremely different from what, you know, I don't want to say that, but our Anglican Bambi, but it's natural, according to what men say, maybe it's natural, stuff like that. But we've seen them not do what they preach out here. So, and they like to say, I sinned a little bit, no. What about we look at the context in which we are in and say, this is what is happening right now? And so we do solutions for ourselves, not for this New Hope group that is paying people to come and tell us about, you know, the anti-pornography bill. They make good bills and then they make them against women. The bill, initially, it looked like a good thing about pornography and all those stuff. And then everyone who has been captured under that bill is a woman. That desire Luzindas. So it's used, and it's not an innocent thing. Like, people are getting paid to do this work. They are being given courses. The same thing that CSOs are actually, you know, doing. And sometimes women rights activists are not even paid to do this work. They have just been on the ground, and they've seen the facts and the situation, and they say, what if we do this? So I think we should stop looking at our religious leaders as if they are not making money, as if they are not being educated, they are innocent. Bambi, they love the Bible so much. These guys are getting paid to do that work. And as Ugandans, we have to recognize that all sides are getting paid. But what are the statistics? What are the facts? You know, who is suffering? Who is benefiting? And how does it end, really? People even kill themselves because you refuse to give me a divorce. And I want it, and I'm tired, and I want to get married to someone else. I come and kill you.
Yeah.
Is that what we want?
Many times it escalates that far. So I also know that there are many reasons why, for example, religious groups, like in that petition of Ngobi and 4 others, have argued that, you know, usually when there's a breakdown of marriages and families, there's usually this other small being, the children, that are left with no protection, and the continued weaponization of children against the parents to separate, because it's thought that when parents separate, then the child is not going to grow up in a healthy family. It's not a loving family. And maybe we should just briefly speak about that to debunk the fact that a family does not mean that this is daddy A, dad, and then a mommy, and then we are all growing up together, because we have seen traditionally grandmothers raising children and they've grown up in a healthy manner. So I don't know if you've experienced that in your work, Tendo and Prima, the fact that I know that even some women sometimes use it, you know, the children, and sometimes it comes from a place of, I don't want to let this go because my whole being is going to get crushed away. So she stays for the children, and it has continued to let women stay in abusive relationships. I don't know if you have interfaced with that in your different spaces where you work.
I mean, even just merely talking to people, there's the feeling that women are naturally endowed maybe with the quality of raising children.
Yeah.
And I mean, throughout my studies of school and feminism and gender, I have learned that actually you're not born knowing how to take care of a child.
Yeah.
You learn how to breastfeed. You learn how to cuddle. You learn how to do this, and the same way women do it, men can do it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the same has been weaponized against women. Like, you leave a marriage, who is going to take care of your children? Where will they go? Or this person is abusing you, but you feel like if I stay, he's probably going to find someone who is going to throw my kids out of school, or my kids won't be able to grow in a nurtured environment, which I feel like is self-defeating in itself, because the man has an obligation to take care of those children as much as the women have to. Yeah. In the past, before the British laws came in place, we always said kids are raised by a community. Yeah. You know, if you're busy or you have to go to school, your mother could take care of those children. Or the paternal father could do that. Because I mean, even coming from where I come from, I know my dad had several kids, and some of them, my grandmothers were taking care of them, and not the mothers. They moved on to their own parents, or the mothers moved on to different marriages, and the grandmother had to do that. So when talking about equality in a marriage or after it has dissolved, I think the discussion still goes up to the kid. Who is going to take care of the kids, or how can we share the kids? I can keep them during school, and then you can have them over the weekends. Or, I mean, I don't see a problem. I have seen some fathers, I think throughout my life I've seen 2. Because I mean, in the absence of a divorce, you could die. Then what happens? Who takes care of the kids? So men don't remarry. They actually do take care of their kids. So it's not that women per se should be tied to the process of raising the child or child rearing. The men can rear kids as well. And I mean, there should be a sense of equality in that kind of discussion.
I don't know if you share the same opinion, Tendo.
Families should not exist on women's pain. And I repeat it. Because I feel like even the using of children is really to say you can suffer for your children and your husband. What happens if, I mean, I leave that marriage and I'm in a good mental space to, like me, I'm a mother, so I know what goes into taking care of children, and you better equipped to take care of a child when your mental space is okay, when you are fine, when you're not waking up to being beaten or to being psychologically abused. Therefore, I think even staying alone, you can give better help to that child, and probably you two people as a partnership are better when you give yourself space and then you come back together to actually take care of, you know, children. I know, for example, Stephen Langa and some other people were creating a family law in which they are saying that women should stay home, like we should go back to that time when women stayed home and took care of their children, and somehow they wanted to legislate that for all of us. But I also think that, you know, not every person, like a mother, may not know about other mothers, but you don't want to spend every waking hour in front of your child. Even if you love them, banahange, you need some time out. And that is the thing that most people don't get, is that, and also there are women who just don't like children. And those are also things that also happen. And like for me, I know my dad raised me quite a lot. He just loves kids, the other guy. And he did all those things. And I'm sure also other men can be brought up to do all those things. In terms of fatherhood, I belong to a network called Men Engage as an organization. And they did a study with AfriChild around positive fatherhood. And one of the things, they asked children, they did the research with children, who is a good father to you? And the children were saying, one who doesn't beat my mother. Are you seeing that already we are one who is always giving me time, who listens to me, and several other things in that research? Already we are saying that even for the children that we are saying that, you know, stay here, because the children, that already that environment is not good for them. That's already what they consider to be good fatherhood, even as children. And what they consider to be good parenthood is someone who has time for them, who is not fighting or beating up their mother, or who is fighting with their father. That's a better space. We cannot build every institution in the community based on how much women suffer and then use it to weaponize, you know, against them that, you know, if you don't say, what about the children? If you don't say, you are going to come from Mrs. to Miss. Let's consider women as human beings that should also have, you know, a good life that they deserve just by the potential of being women. I don't want anyone to ever say that to, you know.
Let's talk about the marriage bill as is now, in the state in which it is. What are some of those things, Prima? Do you think if it got passed, because we've seen a bit of progress in passing of policy and law currently as the latest parliament is preparing the exit for the new one. So there's a lot of pressure to see business close. We've seen the succession amendment bill. We're hearing about the sexual offences bill soon coming back to the table. Can we speak to, if this bill comes to pass in the state in which it is now, what is it speaking to? What is it not speaking to? Because I know because of those very many 40 years, we've seen many things get removed and get put back, and then, you know, so does it still serve the purpose for which the original drafters of this law had in mind? I am mostly pained by the clause on cohabitation, because every single day I come across people, we have relatives, we have friends, strangers telling you, I have been in this marriage, which is a cohabitation, for these many years, and I am worried. You find men and women starting to buy property in other people's names just to hide what they have. So is it still a holy institution like we claim it is? I'd like us to just delve into what are the particulars of the marriage bill. What is it? What is set right now? What is it speaking to, and what is it not speaking to currently? Yeah, yes, Prima.
The marriage bill, I think, is drawn out of the constitutional principle on equality, that we should be equal at the point of getting married. There should be consent, the question of consent. Now, of course, aside from laying the age, being 18, you should be at least 18. You should consent to the marriage. You should be able to, I don't know, to set parameters on how you're engaging within the marriage. And if you decide to dissolve it, then each of you should be able to sit and say, this is how we will act or separate or deal with our children. Ideally, it is equality within the marriage. And then it brings in the aspect of cohabitation. And I think at some point the discussion became, for how long should we cohabit before we say this is something that should be recognized under the law. I think there was a time people were saying 15 years. Then I think it came down to 7. Some people said even after 6 months.
I'm staying with you, and I'm still doing the duties that, in quotes, a wife is expected.
It is possible for us to gain so much within 6 months. And after 6 months, if we go to court, I should be considered as having been your wife or your
Even the wife, I think we should take the word wife, because I think the word wife is problematic. Even if we said I'm your fiance for 1 year and I'm living with you, that is okay, as long as even within that union I have rights and I am recognized for what I'm offering and putting on the table. Because I'm living with you, like, we just, am I allowed? And the thing about these things is that they become monogamous. Now, for example, I'm living with you in the same house. You can't allow me to go out like how I used to do it and have another boyfriend. You actually literally treating me like as if I'm in a monogamous marriage. So now why are you pretending that somehow for some reason it is the same thing like when we first met? And no, it's not.
being exclusive to this one person,
Yeah.
which is again an evolving concept, because marriage is also evolving.
Yeah.
There's the monogamous thing, then there's people saying, why don't we leave it open?
Yeah.
I was reading the new book by Professor Sylvia Tamale, Afrofeminism and Decolonization. And she was looking at the concept of marriage, and in her opinion, or her findings in that book, she said that marriages in African tradition were not always monogamous on the part of the man, but also on the part of the woman.
Yeah.
And you know, she explains from some of our traditions of in Ankole, apparently, when a visitor would come, say a male visitor, they just put their spear in the compound, say, you know what, the lady in this house is now entertaining me. And apparently the husband would leave the bed and the visitor sleeps with the woman. So the wife, so like the thing of sexual fidelity within the concept of a marriage was not part of the marriage.
Yeah.
So why,
To ring-fence
you know,
resources
ring-fence
for
resources
men,
and be able to move on to someone you're sure that this is my child.
Yeah.
But then children were again communal. It didn't matter if your wife slept with your brother, and they, you know, this is our child. It's our child as a community. I think where the saying of a child is raised by a whole village comes from. I mean, someone else maybe fathered them was not a problem.
Yeah.
Well, this is not part of the marriage bill as is right now.
Coming back to that marriage and divorce bill, it has changed hands so much. Because we want to, first of all, make sure that we say that it's for men and for women. Which is true, by the way, but then also we have to identify what makes it political, because what makes it political is what will make it work.
Yes.
Is what, so for you to remove it and say, okay, let's first give you the Domestic Violence Act. Has it solved anything? GBV cases are rising every year in this country, despite the fact that we are ring-fencing marriage. It is the most important institution. Why is it failing to protect people from being abused, children from being defiled by their fathers and brothers and uncles and all those things? Why is it failing to protect the people? For him, it is saying that it is supposed to work. Because maybe the way we've set up the institution is not the way that it is going to work in the time that we are in. And that is okay. I think what most people don't have, I remember we were having a session one time, I've forgotten with who, and then she said, we are failing to reimagine, like that's our disease. So we don't want to reimagine something new. Yet even the things we know now, someone had to reimagine them to say, why don't we get married, two of us, and be together forever until death do us apart? You know, then there's some other, you know, now we are in a different time. Is it working? If it's not working, then I would suggest, and that's a problem with laws that protect women. They take so long. Look at the succession amendment that started at the Kalema Commission. And that's also something that people are like, you know, it's women of nowadays. Those things have been there in legislation. Actually, we depoliticized them. But they have been there since the 40s, even over like 18-something. Women have always had these issues. And I think for us, it's our time to stand and say that we need to protect women. Because if our religions, our marriages, our foundations, simanya morality, are standing on the pain of women, then it doesn't make sense really. Because we cannot be like, our religion stands, you know, we would rather cancel a woman, if that is our marriage. If for us our traditions are standing on the pain of women, on the fact that women can be raped, even after giving birth, that someone can rape you, even when you don't want, because you are bought with bride price. If those are the things that our morals and the good things, if that's what we are proud of, that is so African, that we should not westernize, then really for me it's a problem. We should stop, because no one gains, neither the man, nor the children, nor the wife, in being in a union that is toxic. Because there are people who actually, you're not going to fight, but you don't love each other. Really, you know that we can't work in a marriage, but we had children, but we found out we can't work. And it can be as amicable as that.
I think marriage, at the back of my mind, I keep telling myself, marriage is a good thing.
Yeah.
Marriage is a good thing, but it should work. It shouldn't be prison.
Yeah.
Or sometimes, anyway, from our culture and tradition and how we are raised as girls in these communities. You know, from marriage you get a name, you get identity. I have a friend who keeps telling me that her father keeps reminding her, where are you going to get buried? Like, you have to get married to get a place to be buried. Because you cannot, you know, you get your name, you get an identity, and then you get a place to be buried. And maybe if you have children, there's that sense of belonging. So if you're not married, you're unmarried, that means you don't have a name, you don't have resources, you don't have a place to be buried.
As you kept on speaking, you know, I was just recently having a conversation on Twitter about this marriage and the bill and cohabiting women or people in unrecognized unions, and are saying marriage is a currency. Yeah, you looked at different, and it also, we can't have this conversation without talking about male privilege in marriages. You know, for women it's a currency because I'm addressed differently. You know, they speak about you getting a name. The conversation about taking your partner's name is for a whole other day, but it's a currency for women because you can do certain things when you're married and you're looked at differently. You can get away with certain things if you're married. And you see people even include it on their CVs, especially women, that they are married because they're looked at as more responsible women. So if I walk out of this marriage, how am I supposed now to tell people I am divorced? Even the kind of stigma towards separating parents, the one towards the man and the other towards the woman, they're totally different things. It's on your back, like Tendo kept on saying, the pain is on you, the woman, to make sure the thing works. And that's why you will see that they will do everything possible to see that it works, because the expectation is on you for this marriage to work.
You're the one who has failed.
You're the one who has failed to take care of your husband, you failed to take care of your kids, you're leaving the kids to your other stepmother to take care of them. So there's a lot of pressure around women managing marriages. And that's what makes this conversation more complicated. And that's why it's important for us to legislate it. I know that the other reason why legislators have been very hesitant to speak and legislate on cohabitation is that what Prima was talking about before, the difficulty. Are we going to put a year? Is it going to be 2 years? The fact that we are failing to agree mutually, even through a conversation, should be a taking one for you. That's what we should legislate for the most difficult, to sort of guide couples, to guide individuals, to guide communities on how to go with this. So maybe just also call upon, as the 11th Parliament is coming in. Now we've seen an evolution of younger, youthful, progressive MPs, and that we are hoping that they'll carry this forward. Our expectation of what we would expect from more youthful people to read, to research, be in touch with communities. I know, like, it's business as usual here, MPs not visiting their communities to understand the different realities of women and then men and children in the communities where they live. You know, so it's going to be an important conversation. If this bill is passed into a law with this clause in Parliament, then the new Parliament is going to have another role on their hands, because there's going to be need for review, because most of these things have not been legislated. I guess they've been, removed here and there. So as we close this episode of Black No Sugar, thank you, Prima, for visiting us and generously sharing your legal expertise with us. If it's your first time, please comment, let us know what you think about the institution of marriage, how it has evolved, how we are dealing with divorce, and what needs to be done to manage the process of divorce better, especially the fact that in its state right now, it's at the predicament of mostly women and children. Thank you for watching. Catch you.